to the Walkshow podcast. This is your host, Walker Neer. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's episode, we're joined by Misha Zarins, the musician and producer of the Walkshow. We actually get together to talk about stand-up comedy. It's something that's really important to both of us, and we kind of wanted to talk about just different comedians that have had an impact on us, and kind of talk about the significance of comedy at large and what defines stand-up. We had a ton of fun recording the episode, and I hope you guys enjoy listening to it. As always, today's show is produced by Misha Zarins, as well as the music. Thanks for listening. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Walkshow podcast. Today, we've got as a guest my dear friend, also the producer, musician, and artist for the show, Misha Zarins.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up, man? Today we're going to talk about some stand-up comedy. People who have known me for a long time probably know that I have dabbled in stand-up a time or two throughout my life. When I was 20, I started it for the first time and did some open mics, and pretty quickly was given the opportunity to be the MC at a local comedy club called Sir Laugh-A-Lot. And basically they had an open mic and then a show with two professional comics on Thursday. And then on Friday and Saturday, those professional comics did two separate shows each night. So a total of 5 shows, 6 if you include the open mic, is what I got to do each weekend. And it was a lot of fun, and it was a really cool opportunity. I wasn't old enough to drink, so I would just suck down Black and Mild cigars because I was so nervous all the time and couldn't take the edge off, because I could only have soda. So stand-up has just been something that for me has been a really important thing in my life for a long time, but it's interesting to me how my relationship with it's changed. Most recently, I did stand-up a few times, and I think maybe now 5 years ago, and it was interesting. I hoped that what it would be was that it would be this like epiphany moment where I would get back on stage and get behind the mic and be like, oh my God, I haven't done this in 10 years and this is what I've been missing. And it was not that experience. I didn't hate it or something, but the truth is once I was at 30, I just don't really care to go to bars and hang out for 4 hours and listen to 10 other open micers go. And,
Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit you got to put up with to get through to do what you need to do.
I mean, and to be clear, it's hanging out at a bar, so it's not like I have to go like mine, coal or something for 3 hours.
It's not where you want to be,
right? Yeah,
it's just a job. I could rather be home than doing whatever I want.
Right. But anyway, so comedy, though, stand-up specifically, has been something that I, again, personally have dabbled in and tried and done. And actually, the last time I did it, I was paid to open for this band. So the only time I've been paid so that I could say I was a professional comic.
I would say it makes you a professional comic.
So that's pretty cool.
You were actually a professional comic.
Yeah. So we have a stand-up comedian on the show today, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, a professional.
And it's me.
It's nice.
Just to be clear.
Nice.
I'll decide what's funny. That's today's episode. Is Misha's going to bring up topics, and then I'll rule whether or not it's worth talking about.
Maybe it should be your tagline, just in general. No, I'll decide what's funny. Yeah, I like that.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. But anyway, so we wanted to just kind of talk about, it's something that's been a huge influence for both of us.
Yeah,
and really,
definitely.
People who don't know Misha and me's relationship, that's really kind of not just stand-up, but comedy specifically, more so broader comedy, is really how we became friends. And honestly, that's how I get most of my friends, is I think that something's funny with them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyway,
our first relationship, the way that we met was in high school, and we walked home from the same high school, and we went during the same path or along the same path going to our respective homes. He went a little bit farther than my house, but I was going the same direction. And I think we saw each other a few times, and then eventually, we just kind of saw each other enough that it was like we should just talk.
Well, we had class together, too. We had a couple classes together.
Was that before or after?
I'm pretty sure it was at the same time.
I just remember, we really bonded and clicked on talking about how ridiculous things like Smurfs and the Snorks,
Scooby-Doo.
We would just kind of make fun about how ridiculous and silly they were.
Well, and how obvious drug references they are.
Yeah, right.
You know?
And who came up with the premise?
Right.
Like, what were they doing to come up with
a guy lives in
a
a forest where he takes magical potions and sees little blue people that are trying to undermine him.
Right. And our 14-year-old, 15-year-old minds thought that was like hilarious.
Yes.
I loved that. Like, that was like, okay, this will be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
So what would you say is the, maybe one of the earliest, doesn't have to be the first, but one of your earliest memories of stand-up? Like, what's one of the earliest stand-up acts you remember?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, I remember watching, like, Richard Pryor. I remember watching, Bill Cosby. Those were kind of, like, played in background. I was kind of privileged when I was a kid, and my parents had HBO and Cinemax and Showtime, collectively all three at one point. That faded away because eventually they figured out what the bill was going to be, and they're like, yeah, fuck that, we're shutting that down. But there was a time period where we had all three, and I remember watching those, but the definitive one that like set the tone for me wanting to be like, yes, I love comedy, yes, this is like all in, was Dave Chappelle half-hour special on HBO.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
that's like 99, maybe 98.
I was gonna say I was probably 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Seaman Bandit struck again. Like, I actually played that episode on a bit for my fiance Bridget the other day because I randomly throughout my life make references to Chappelle's show and to Chappelle's stand-up because I love it so much that his bit about the crack landlord, the landlord addicted to crack, like, still makes me smile. I'm smiling right now because I love it so much. You got the rent? Come on, I need it. Well, I'll come back tomorrow. A little bit more. For the rent. Like, it's just that whole bit. Like, I just love it. Like, and that really did. Like, I could watch that. I taped it VHS. Like, for those of you that are old enough to understand, like, taped it. Watched it religiously, still laughed about it. Still to this day laugh about it. So definitely a huge influence. But I grew up with Seinfeld. So like I guess you could say that like Seinfeld too was largely like a huge influence. But that wasn't like
a stand-up special.
Beginning to finish. So yeah.
So I would say yeah, Seinfeld. I mean, I grew up watching Seinfeld. In fact, it strangely I as a young kid, I mean from like, I don't know, there's probably a 4 or 5 year period that was like the golden age of Seinfeld and NBC sitcom comedy TV. But I built an entire like weekly routine of television watching, of which Seinfeld was the keystone. So like Seinfeld came on Thursday nights at 8:00.
Right.
And so and Friends came on before that.
Yeah.
And I think Frasier maybe was after it.
Right.
Just a golden age. I think Frasier was on Tuesdays. Now that I walk through it, but either way,
crazy you remember that.
Yeah, I mean, literally, what ended up happening was because I wanted to watch Seinfeld. It ended up that I just kind of plugged myself into watching sitcoms all throughout the week. So Will and Grace and Grace Under Fire, and tons of those.
Well, and I guess really like comedy albums were something that I did listen to a lot too. Like Adam Sandler, What the Hell Happened to Me, and Why Are You Laughing at Me? Maybe is one of the other ones that I listened to. Like, I really did like comedy albums a lot, so I did listen to those two exclusively. And like Drew Carey was another one. 12, 13. That was like Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore era.
Yeah. I never was really into Adam Sandler. Never really did comedy albums. But yeah, so Seinfeld was anyway. I was talking about all the other shows. Seinfeld was the keystone of it. And once Seinfeld went off the air, which was, I believe, when I was in 8th grade, was when the series finale of Seinfeld occurred. And I just stopped watching TV at that point. I just like all of it, like not just Thursdays.
Damn.
All of it I unplugged because that's why I call it the keystone, because it was literally like that's what mattered. And then once that went away, I didn't really care anymore.
He gone.
Yeah, he gone. But but as far as stand up, as a stand up, the most impactful stand up special I remember, the earliest I should say at least. Which I never saw prior. I never saw Robin Williams. I never saw Eddie Murphy. I mean, I have now later as an adult, but as a kid, I didn't. But anyway, it was Chris Rock's Bring the Pain, which is either 95 or 96.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And that was the most...
Didn't like it. Yeah.
Oh, man, I loved it. It was the most influential stand-up
was that the one where he talks about bullet control? I can't
Probably,
remember.
yeah.
That bit is just like absolute genius.
He also has the bit there about how like in the hood, coming out of jail is more respectable than coming out of college. So if you come out of college like, oh, you the smart one now, huh? Oh, you the smart one now, huh? Which is actually just the bit that Michael Scott redoes in The Office in episode 1 of season 1 or episode 2, and they have to have the diversity training.
Yeah, right.
That's the bit he's referencing. But anyway, it was mind altering for me, that Chris Rock bit. Like, I just absolutely adored it and watched it all the time. We had HBO.
I remember a lot of people liking that.
Yeah, and I got to watch Def Comedy Jam a lot because we had HBO.
Okay, yeah. So
like,
that was definitely like a huge impact because I did watch a lot of Def
Martin
Comedy
Lawrence,
Jam.
Joe Torre, Guy Torre.
Right.
So I actually just found out literally within the last 2 months that Joe and Guy Torre are brothers. Literally thought it was the same guy who they just sometimes called Joe and sometimes called Guy until 1 month ago. And I was like, what, really? It's two guys? Huh. That makes sense because I always wondered why they didn't call him the same name consistently. And one of them is like a little bit bigger or whatever, but I just... But I haven't seen that guy since I was 8, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, you don't know until you know.
But yeah, Joe and Guy Torre,
so
two
long
different people.
later, you find out.
But yeah, so I would say that Chris Rock bit. Now, I actually didn't really like the follow-up specials that he had to that. He had a second and a third one that came after that I like. The second one was bigger and blacker, and then the third one, I don't even remember what it was called, but I wasn't into either of those in the same way. Bring the Pain was...
What's the last one that he released?
Well, he just released one like 2 years ago or a year ago called like Tambourine, I think.
I watched that one.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah, I liked it.
The thing that I didn't like about Chris Rock is that he like his approach and his like mannerisms. I just didn't like. It was very obnoxious to me.
Oh, I love it.
The material was very hard for me to get to because his mannerisms were like, you know that, and then that. It's just like it always seemed very like choppy and very like in your front, in your face, and I don't really identify with that kind of comedy. Like I'm not a big Sam Kinison fan where it's like blam in your face, take it kind of thing. It's like I like mellow build into like slow, progression.
Yeah. Chris Rock to me, he has a really interesting way of just over and over again saying a premise. And the premise almost becoming like the punchline. Like that repeated premise over and over again turns into the punchline.
Yeah.
But anyway, so after that, I would say that probably the next most influential one, though, would be Dave Chappelle Killing Them Softly.
Yeah, I would say largely I don't know of another stand-up that I actually know more than that.
Yeah.
And I actually have watched it so much that if you actually put a gun to my head right now, I could probably recite it word for word because I've watched it that much. Like, I can pick out bits still and like reference it. And the last time I saw it was like 10 years ago, but I taped it again and I watched it so much. I mean, bitch, I live in a fucking trash can. Like, Jesus. Like,
the Oscar the Grouch bit, man. The whole Sesame Street routine he does is just incredible.
Right.
It's so good. Yeah, well, and we got to see him when we were juniors or seniors in high school. He came and performed at MSU here.
Yeah. That was, oh my God. That was
and it was all different material. It wasn't material we'd seen in the set before.
When he came out on stage immediately and acted like it was a prison light that was like searching for him, like he was breaking out of jail or something. He was like running from it.
Dodging the spotlight.
Laughing super hard. Oh my God. That was so great.
Yeah. And then I got to see him again like 2 years ago, I think, here in Springfield.
Or were you with me in backstage when we met him?
No.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't meet him. Like, he didn't care. He didn't know who I was.
And you just got something autographed or something.
I got something autographed. Yeah, that was still to this day, I'm still, like, super excited about it. It's like, shit, I
Right.
He has no idea
Sure.
how much I love him across
Yeah.
all things incorporating in life. Like, yeah, it's just
Yeah, he's my top comics. Probably Chappelle, Seinfeld, Chris Rock would
Yeah.
probably be my top 3 stand-ups that I've consumed the most of, and that have been there, that I've liked a lot. And the thing is, though, is that, like, honestly, Seinfeld's only had a few different acts ever, so it's not he's so different from the rest of them.
right.
He's so different.
Not
Ooh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I know I interrupted you and me just now, but I actually have to say David Cross.
I was going to
I
say,
can't-
I was actually going to put David Cross. Maybe
David
number
Cross
3.
goes in that. He's on that Mount Rushmore.
Honestly, I was going to say Chappelle. My very, very close number 2 is Patton. Patton Oswalt
yeah.
is ridiculously amazing.
He is good.
And then, probably maybe David Cross. I don't know. Honestly, like, I just got introduced to Bill Burr not that long ago, and I actually really love Bill Burr a lot.
I like Bill Burr is interesting to me because I like Bill Burr in interviews
Right.
more, but in stand-up, I feel like his material is just his delivery and the character that he is on stage is just kind of like, you kind of just seem like a complete and total piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of why I like him, because he actually doesn't seem like a piece of shit. But you're actually waiting for him to be a piece of shit all the time.
Yeah.
Like, he's always on the cusp of a bit where you're like, this is obviously going to lead into a situation when you're talking about abusing a woman or being racist or being sexist or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's actually not. He never actually goes there because his position is actually
He's not actually a
always
monster.
warranted and rational. It's just from a perspective that we don't ever talk about. And so it's like, damn, the fact that you can toe the line that close to, like, tension is pretty hard. But I mean, honestly, like, we haven't really said it, but I think number 3 is probably Bill Hicks for me.
Oh, yeah.
I love Bill Hicks. Like, I probably always will love Bill Hicks because he represents a wide spectrum of comedy. Like, he doesn't execute always on the level that I want a comic to execute on, like Patton or Chappelle would. Not every joke that he does lands, but he does things that are really subtle. He does things that are really stupid and silly, that are, dumb and, like, insignificant, but he makes you think about a lot of things that are very real and very impactful. And he gets very gross and very vulgar. All in the spectrum, maybe within 5 minutes, those things might happen. And he might just yell at you as an audience member for not participating in the thing that he wants you to participate in. And it's just like, man, that was so great that you just had that freedom to do that.
So that's kind of where, I'm in a weird place with stand-up now, where it's actually pretty rare that I find an act that I laugh out loud at while I watch.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare, but it's not because no one's good at it. And it's not because I don't think anything is funny, as much as that, like, I don't know. To me, I think that I just have a very specific desire of what I want out of stand-up, and a very kind of rigid expectation.
Yep.
And especially now with like Netflix and how many people get a special.
Totally.
there's so many versions of what a stand-up act could be. Like Neil Brennan's Three Mics. Did you watch that?
Yeah, I did.
So I think that's a really interesting performance. But I don't know how comfortable I am calling it stand-up.
Right.
And I think that Neil Brennan is a stand-up. So I'm not trying to say like he's not credible or he's not a comedian or I'm the authority on who gets to judge who is or isn't to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. I just mean like, and honestly, Chappelle's stand-ups that he came out with on Netflix in the last year or two, like,
amazing.
Well, so I liked him a lot, but they also, to me, go in this direction that Neil Brennan's did, where it's like, this is more like your show, like the Neil Brennan show, Three Mics, cool, or the Chappelle stand-up show, whatever it's called. But I almost just don't feel like it's just stand-up.
Yeah.
Whereas like some of the other routines, like Killing Him Softly, is just stand-up.
Well, like the Austin routine, I feel like was. But then like the other two things that he did, like he definitely took a very different approach where he was just like, I'm going to go into a serious topic and we're just going to kind of talk about that. And I'm just kind of construct a narrative within that. And I don't really care if you laugh.
Right.
Within every 30 seconds. I'm not looking for a laugh every 30 seconds time beat. I'm looking for a laugh every 5 minutes. But I'm going to try and tell what I want to. Because I already did the stand-up special where I already did jokes every 30 seconds where you got to laugh. You know what I mean? So it's like...
No, I get it. And it's not that I think that they shouldn't... that they're doing it wrong. I think it's just that... I think that the problem that we have right now is that we don't have a good enough system of definitions for what these different performances are. And so we just say... It's a guy on a stage by himself with a mic and no instrument.
Right.
And generally he's funny.
Right.
So it's stand up because it's not slam poetry. It's not a solo play.
Right.
So it's stand up and it's like, but it's not really.
Right.
And it doesn't diminish it in any way. Again, in no way am I attacking it. I thought Chappelle's stuff was, as you said, it's awesome. Like, it's really funny and it is thought provoking and thoughtful. And like, the stuff he talks about is like, well, that's an interesting way to look at that or whatever. But that's not, to me, that's not stand-up. Like, when I watch stand-up, I want to laugh. And a really interesting experience I had recently was I watched Elsa Schlesinger. Have you ever watched her?
Yeah, she's cool.
So, I watched...
I like her, but...
Yeah, I watched one of her routines on Netflix. I don't remember which special it was. I think it was one of the older ones, not the most recent. I didn't laugh ever. However, I wanted to watch the entire thing, and when it was over, I was like, that was an incredible performance.
Yeah, right.
Like the energy that she has and and really it's a well-constructed stand-up routine. It's not even, it doesn't even fit into this category that I'm talking about with Brennan and Chappelle, where it's kind of not stand-up because you're also just like sharing thoughts on, it's almost like a podcast format, you know, except they're not doing it in this setting.
Oh, right.
And Elsa Schlesinger's is not that. It's very much more a stand-up act. It's just all supposed to be jokes. She doesn't ever take a serious turn. But I still didn't find it... I didn't find myself just laughing out loud.
Yeah, right.
And I thought that was strange because I was still interested in it, and I still thought, I'm glad she made that, and I'm glad I saw it, and I'm glad it's there. And again, in no way am I trying to diminish it. There's nothing... I don't have a critique of it.
I know.
It just wasn't... funny in that way.
Right.
I don't know. It's weird.
No, I mean, it could still be interesting. And if it doesn't really hit those moments of finding something that you find funny, like, I mean, it's pretty rare whenever we actually find something, you and I individually, where we laugh out loud when we watch something by ourselves that's funny. We generally laugh together. When we're in a group of people, it's much more funny. Even if it's comic that's probably not that good, we're probably more likely to laugh at something that's kind of funny if we're in a group of people or surrounded by an audience that's actually funny. The last thing that I actually remember, like, watching, like, by myself, like, I'm just going to watch this. I'm going to see, like, what it's like. I have no idea, no reference point whatsoever. I'm just going to see if it's okay and funny or not. Was the LAG show. I laughed my fucking ass off. Like, that show is so fucking funny. I was in tears laughing so fucking hard. Like, it's that good. Like,
Ali G,
it's just rare to have that kind of experience where it's like, damn, you just hit all the right fucking buttons for me, man. You just did.
Yeah. So Aziz Ansari has a bit about 50 Cent and he being in the restaurant with 50 Cent, and 50 Cent orders a grapefruit soda.
Right.
And then it is delivered to him, and he asks the waiter why it's not purple. Because, and Aziz Ansari then elaborates, again, this is his joke, but he then elaborates that the 50 Cent doesn't know what a grapefruit is.
Right.
And that he now gets to watch another grown man explain to him the difference between the fruit, a grape, and a grapefruit.
Right.
Like, I laughed pretty hard at that bit. Like, that was funny. But that whole set, I don't think is front to back funny. Like the whole Aziz Ansari
right.
hour-long special or whatever that's in.
I want to kind of take this in a different direction, if I may. Like, I kind of want to talk about why is this significant for us? Like, why do we actually like stand-up comedy? Like,
well, that's kind of
what is the significance?
Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to. Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of what I'm trying to explore. Is that like it's weird. It's interesting because it was something that as a kid I completely devoured and loved and even tried to do, and now it's something that
really even how little.
No. I mean, as a little kid, I started devouring it and watching it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, my earliest comedy memory is probably, honestly, one of the earliest stand-up comics I remember, and you said him earlier, is Sam Kinison.
Yeah.
I mean, I was probably like 4 or 5 years old when I remember seeing that.
Shit, yeah.
So, but anyway, so like I liked it a lot, but then as I've gotten older, my attachment to it has become less and less. So that is what I'm saying, is that it's interesting to me because it's changed, my relationship with it has changed significantly, but I also feel like it has changed significantly.
Oh, definitely. Mine becomes more and more. Like, the more that I become engrossed of it, the more that I actually want it. I'm more selective about the comics that I actually want. I would actually be more inclined, even though I'm a musician and I listen to music and it's my hobby and I love it, I would be more inclined to go to a comedy show pretty much every night and see a stand-up comic than I would be to see a new band play at a new venue, like, and just see what they had to offer. Because it's more rewarding for me to see a stand-up comic. Like, I don't know what really the reward is there that I'm really looking for, but I just love it, being able to, like, hear someone's perspective given on the world. Because that's really what it is. It's stand-up comedy that I love so much, is like hearing this person's worldview, and the ones that do it so well tell it from such a ridiculous standpoint. The ones that I love so much are the ones that always take reality and poke fun at how fucking ridiculously and stupid we follow these rudimentary rules that make no fucking sense. And you're like, why are we doing this? This makes no fucking sense. This is fucking dumb. And here's why. And then throw this ridiculously very on the nose, very on point joke about it, which is super fucking funny. And it's like, thank you. Where have you been, George Carlin? Where have you been, Bill Hicks? Where have you been, David Cross? Like, how did I miss all these fucking comics? Like, that's why I love Patton. Patton is an educated English major from a university. So when you hear Patton talk in his stand-up, it's not the same thing. And I think this is probably a misconception that people have when they actually approach comics that they may actually meet on the street, is that, oh, you talk to me from your stage persona like I was there, like you were talking to me, so I feel connected to you, so I can talk to you as if you were just talking to me on the street. So it's like, hey, what's going on? Are we friends, or what's going on? Like, we're hanging out, and it's like, I don't know you. That was a whole bit that I was doing that I rehearsed 20 times. I recorded and wrote that whole set for 40 minutes. Me interacting with you right now has nothing to do with that. Like, I'm not the same person as that. It's a show that I created, you know? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, you know?
I'm not sure I understand what you're explaining. I mean, I understand you're saying that there's a difference between the comic and their act, like the person in the comic.
Yeah, so like I like the fact that there's people that comics specifically that showcase their ability to show reality, how ridiculous it is, how insane it is, and then personify that so well that it actually comes across as being a very natural in conversation.
Right.
And then the people that are actually in the audience misconstrued that as being actual conversation. That's how well crafted it is. Like, it becomes so well crafted,
right,
that it's like, oh my God, it's just like I'm talking to you right now. So they mistake that when they actually go up to the comic and meet them, like after a show or whatever, and talk to them, and it's like, oh, I'm not actually that person. Like, that was actually something that I did. I just made it feel that way.
Right.
So that it made it seem like I was actually, like,
right,
connecting with you, but we're not actually friends. I don't fucking know you. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something so completely different than the relationship of the musician, of the dancer, of any kind of performance artist, or anybody who's kind of a movie star. You know, it's like, your movie role was tailored specifically to me. It's like, not really. I was just kind of acting and doing something that was specific that a screenwriter wrote, the director was telling me to do. If it touched you, great.
I think actors are probably the most similar to comedians in that way, where people attribute the final product of the performance that they see to being like something that just came very naturally to that person, and is a reflection of themselves, when really there could be an enormous, you know, in the case of an actor, there's, as you said, screenwriters and people writing the script, and a director and cinematography and all these other things that shape how you interpret that. And with stand-up, there's oftentimes hours and hours and hours of practice and refinement and cutting words and adding words and all this stuff, so that when you see it on HBO, you know, it seems like it's this very off the cuff, you know, I'm just riffing on some things, and it's like, no, they spent thousands of hours
refining that to be what it is, so it does seem natural, but they cut all the excess out of it. They made it seem that way. Just, it's amazing. It's amazing to, like, be able to identify with that, because it is a very huge emotional connection. Like, I have felt that. I mean, surely, like, Chappelle was, like, the first person that just, like, hit me right in the fucking chest with that shit. And it's like, Chappelle could probably absolutely say nothing except gibberish, and the way that he talks and his mannerisms make me laugh every time. Kind of like Will Ferrell. Like, it's just kind of Will Ferrell being Will Ferrell, but it's like, he just radiates funny. You're just ridiculous by nature. I just fucking love it.
So I feel the same way about the guy that he does like Step Brothers with, John something.
John C. Reilly.
But do you know that guy's actually like a classically trained, like,
he's fucking awesome.
He's like a real actor, not just a comic.
No, he's done lots of serious roles.
I know. Like, I've never seen it, but I feel like it would be hard to see him in that, because it's like, but you're Will Ferrell's sidekick guy that's like, and you exude the same silliness that a Will Ferrell does. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, you know, to tie it back to kind of what we, you know, to stand up generally, stand up itself has just taken a very different meaning for me over the years. And it's interesting to me to see how I interact with it. Once in a while, I still find a bit like that Aziz Ansari bit that I brought up, or I find a new comic. Like, there's a guy named Nate Bargatze that I do laugh out loud at by myself. Like, he's super hilarious, but it's all very, very silly. So it's actually not life commentary or a worldview. It's it's just silly. Like, it's just ridiculous.
And that, that just comes from the same thing of your taste in music or taste in books or whatever else. Like, it is subjective, but it's like, if you want something that's silly, not like life serious, like, there are comics out there specifically for you. If you like people that are poking fun at social commentary and want to talk about the real world and how it's dumb, like, there's people there for you. If you like exclusive vulgarity that's just talking about dick and pussy jokes, like, there's a whole fucking demographic of there just for you that you can adhere to. And then there's people that try and juggle all three in between that I think we are mostly, fans of.
Yeah, someone that I bounced around on for a while, but that I've actually now settled in, and the last time I listened, I did laugh by myself again, but is Anthony Jeselnik.
Yeah.
One-liner guy. And at first I was like, that's not real comedy, that's one-liners. But now I'm not that pretentious. And now I see it as it's just a different form, a different version of it.
It's kind of Mitch Hedberg for me. It's the same thing. Like, everyone I know, like, fucking loves Mitch Hedberg. I can't stand the dude. Like, but it's not that I don't respect him. Like, what he does and what he did was really well crafted, and constructing his jokes was something that wasn't ever done before, but it wasn't something that really attested to my taste, and it wasn't anything more than that. Like, it just didn't hit home. I was just I think that's kind of clever. Like, yeah, you got it. Like, that's kind of funny, but dying over laughter, and it's like, nah, man. I'm like, I'm Chappelle. Like, I'm with that kind of clever. Like, that's the kind of like ridiculousness that I like.
Yeah, I think for me, David Cross is his ability to blend the like serious point with the most. It's like David Cross is the closest thing to South Park in stand-up form. Like,
yeah, I would agree with that.
Like, it's this hey, let's take a topic and then blow it out to its furthest logical conclusion and just see what that looks like. And it's really irreverent, and it's really it's really cutting often. Yeah. But I love it. Like, David Cross was one, but he was, I didn't find out, so earlier I said Chris Rock, Seinfeld, Chappelle. Well, that's also kind of the order in which I discovered comedy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So David Cross probably came after that, you know what I mean? But then you have like Patton and those other, and Louis C.K. and Aziz Ansari and these other people that are more modern. They just came later in life too. So it's also, there's not a nostalgia associated with them in the same way that there is Chappelle.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Seinfeld and Chris Rock.
Yeah, so. Definitely. With Cross, like, I think we probably got both into Cross around the same time.
You were into him before me.
Okay. So that was roughly like Shut Your Fucking Mouth, You Crybaby. That was his album that he released that era. I don't remember.
0405.
Year. Yeah, around that time. And those bits and that set is just ridiculously great. I mean, it really is great. My only reason why I don't put him in like a topper value rather than the other ones is only because he takes a lot of liberty with how he delivers jokes. Like, he does not deliver jokes on a rhythm basis of like every minute you could probably expect a joke to land and then you're going to get laughter from it. He might tell you a story that might last for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then there's a punchline, and it's not really that funny, but it's not necessarily that witty, but it's like contextually hilarious for like a social situation. He pokes fun at politics a lot. He pokes fun at like Catholicism, and he's an outspoken atheist, and he's an outspoken like anti-Trump supporter. So like, he has a whole bit about anti-Bush because he came out with that album when Bush came out. So like, all of us that were like anti-Bush, we were like, oh my god, this is amazing. But there are bits where it just like goes on and on for like a few minutes, where it's just like, okay, are you gonna get to the point here?
So it sounds like
the
really
rhythm is off.
You really, though, it sounds like you're kind of talking about what I was talking about with Neil Brennan, the 3 mics, and the most recent Chappelle things, where it's like there's elements of it that don't feel like pure stand-up, and that's why I thought that I think that's an interesting thing to consider. And I don't know how that changes. I don't know how we come up with more categories, or if anyone's interested in doing that, or who will, or who it's up to. But I feel like there needs to be more nuance in how we categorize these performances and these different performers, because it's not fair to lump them all together. I mean, again, like, you know, we talked about Seinfeld does one act. Louis C.K. writes a new act every year. Like, that's wildly different. That's a wildly different.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Everything.
Like, it's so weird to me from Seinfeld perspective, who is a multi-millionaire, maybe even billionaire at this point. With
I don't know. I don't know what his ownership stakes and things are.
Like, right? I mean, he sold it for like $500 million or something crazy. Like, he sold it for a lot of money. So, like, I'm sure at this point with that and Seinfeld, like, he's probably, you know, a billionaire maybe. But he largely toured on a set of material that he constructed, and then just did that for decades until he retired it with "I'm going to tell you for the last time." And all of that material was from Seinfeld, which was from all of those years. And it's weird to me from a performer standpoint. I'm not a performer, but you know, trying to put myself in the position of doing that as a performance, going day to day, city to city, doing that exact same material and trying to deliver those same lines as still being fun and entertaining.
Yeah, I think
we're like with Louis C.K., who delivers 50 minutes every year. It's like, at least you have a tour that you can deliver and kind of play with, and every show kind of has its own dynamic where you can do that, and after the tour is over, then you rewrite a new 50 minutes of material, and then you do that the next year and try it out and see how that, you know what I mean? It's like every time you do it, it feels like a new kind of shell in the gun, I guess, for a stupid metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I think the difference is that Seinfeld comes from an era where the act is looked at more like a play.
Yeah, no, and he's openly said that. He's like, it's a show. I was promoting a show. I took the show on the road, just like old 50s and 60s shows used to do. You construct a show, and then you take that show on the road. So it's like, I'm taking my show on the road. And I think that that's probably the best way to, like, disconnect yourself from the fact that you're trying to, like, do something that's engaging with the audience, is that I've constructed the show, now I just deliver it. I can rehearse it, it's external to me, not personal, and I can just, like, showcase it to you. Where that's probably why I wouldn't put him in the top 3, is that, like, I don't feel that personalization from him. Like, Chappelle feels that way, Louis C.K. feels that way, Patton feels that way, Bill Burr feels that way. You know, like, there's comedians that, not that he doesn't feel genuine or he's not professional, it's just like, maybe there kind of feels like an absence of delivery because you've done it 800 times, maybe?
I don't know, yeah.
I don't know.
For me, it's more just his influence on me more than it is whether or not I think it measures up as, you know, it's not really trying to compare them as one being better than the other as much as it's like, or even that really when I say that they're on my Mount Rushmore, it's more just as far as my influences and what I think about comedy and how I look at it all.
Yeah.
But then also, you know, he did that documentary. So he did the thing where he retired the act, and then he did a documentary called The Comedian.
Yeah.
Where he rebuilds an entirely new act starting with 5 minutes and builds a whole brand new set, and you get to watch that whole thing happen. And I think that probably really endeared me to Seinfeld as well, because it did kind of remove that veil, and it did kind of expose him to be like, oh, he is a real comic.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I wasn't trying to, like...
No, I don't think you were. I'm just saying, like, I think that kind of helped. That probably... And that's not really... You don't get that from the act. You get that from watching that documentary, which I used to watch over and over.
And I think that's really his genius, is that he did a really good job of not just being like, I'm a comic, and if you can document this and put it on a DVD, then a lot of other people have it. He really thought about it from a medium's perspective, which is why Seinfeld, like, worked so well. He worked stand-up into a sitcom. What other fucking show does that? What other show since him has really done that?
That's actually, I mean, that's what Martin Lawrence, The Martin Show was.
No, yeah, true.
That was actually I mean, same era. I don't know literally the years that they came out, but I mean, they're all on in the 90s.
Yeah.
Grace Under Fire was Brett Butler, I think her name was. She was a stand-up comic.
Yeah,
That was actually the formula for getting a show for a while, was be a stand-up comic.
No, but do they do stand-up comedy in the show?
Oh, do they play a stand-up
segments with them doing stand-up?
Gotcha.
And then actually, you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
I think Seinfeld's the only one that's actually
That might be true. That might be true.
And still to this day, no one's really done that, which is kind of weird. But that's his profession in the show.
That's what I was going to say.
But then
also,
I thought, for a long time, like, well, I don't really know how you fucking top that. But comedians in the car, or comedians in cars getting coffee, fucking genius.
Yeah.
Super genius. Amazing. Love that show.
Yeah.
I mean, 15-minute episodes of just, like, cars matching with comedies, like, the comedians. Like, it's amazing. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I like it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could obviously talk about stand-up comedy and just comedy as a broad topic for the rest of the night, I think. But I think that it's definitely a fascinating thing, because I think it is similar to music in that there's so many versions of it, and there's not a right or wrong thing to like. You know, it's entirely subjective, and there's room for all of it, right? And it has the ability to have that same level of impact on you, though, that music does, or that movies do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people.
I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know, like, the cultural significance of it. Like, it seems very important. It seems like it's very, very right there on things that should be very important. But it's very hard for me to define why it should actually be there. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the thing is,
a social commentary.
It is, but I don't know that. I think that also as mediums of entertainment have evolved, you know, stand-up used to be one of the only ways to see comedy, because there was only 3 channels, so there's only 3 possible TV shows on at any given time, and that kind of thing. And now as the access has exploded, there's just so many more ways that comedy, because I think comedy ultimately is kind of a truth to power thing. Right. I think that's its significance in culture. And I think stand-up is kind of now just been, it's just a part of a lot bigger thing that is just comedy as a whole, which could be The Office, or Bruno, or Borat, or Ali G.
And I actually thought, like, that there wasn't a show that maybe has done something like Seinfeld has done before, with, like, showcasing stand-up comedy specifically and making that, like, the forefront. Actually, Marvelous Miss Maisel. I don't know if you've ever seen Marvelous Miss Maisel. It's fucking ridiculously awesome, because it's about a 1950s woman, housewife, who is actually Jewish in New York City, and she gets divorced, and her husband actually at the time wants to be a stand-up comedian, and he's doing, like, showcases at a local bar, but she's so disgruntled from the fact that she's actually divorced that she just, like, rants on stage and, like, just rants, and it's fucking genius, and she actually becomes a stand-up comedian. So it's about her progression and the 1950s of being a stand-up comedian, and it's fucking insanely great. It's super good, because you do see the progression, and it goes into nuances of being an art form, of not just, are you funny amongst your friends? Are you funny amongst people that think that you're witty? Like, can you just go up on a mic on a whim and just rant, and is that okay? Like, maybe you do have to rehearse, like, a 5-minute set or a 10-minute set. Like, can you do that so well that you don't get booed off a stage? can you take a 10-minute set and turn it into a 40-minute set? You know what I mean? Like, there's growth there that you have to like put work into, an effort to showcase what you actually want to do,
so
to make it seem natural.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's the other thing is there's so many approaches. You have the Seinfeld that's, again, it's like he's writing a play. You have Chappelle, who went to performing arts school and started doing stand-up when he's 14. You have Louis C.K., who's putting out a new hour every year.
Right.
But then you have Bill Burr, who you brought up at the very beginning of our conversation.
Love that dude.
He doesn't write. He just literally writes topics and riffs. And that's it. And now he kind of has the riff in his head. And, you know, if something worked, then he knows that and then he'll use it again. So it's not like it's completely blind, but
he might practice it. But
not really.
It's not a science. It's not like here's the mathematical formula to do comedy. Like it's a method. It has to work for you, but you'll know it by the amount of booze or the amount of laughs that you get. I guess. I don't know. You would know, but I don't know. Like, I've never done it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a thing where whenever a joke lands, you feel this. And again, it's not like I've been in an arena or something, but just in front of 100 people or something, if you have a joke land, it feels like you're a puppeteer because you know when it's supposed to be funny and when you were right and you said it and it's funny and now they all laugh.
Right.
You feel like you pulled a string, and so it's a empowering feeling, but that is then on the other side of the coin or the other edge of the sword or whatever from when you know when it's supposed to be funny and they don't react, right. Then that's a hard space to fill.
Right.
And the thing is though, is that I actually found that it wasn't really when they didn't laugh that is hard. Like, I mean, yeah, that sucks because you want them to laugh. But if they're paying attention to you, at least you did that well enough. Like, at least you got them to listen.
Right.
The hardest is when you're in the middle of a bit and you look out and you see people start looking down at their phones or having conversations just amongst themselves at the table. And you're like, oh man, I've lost the room. You know what I mean? Like, now it's not whether or not the joke was funny. They're not even paying attention. Like, that was the most uncomfortable feeling. And not that it happened. I mean, I didn't do stand up that much anyway. That wasn't a common experience, but it did happen a couple times. And that was probably the worst because then it's like
pretty disarming.
They're not even judging it because they just like it wasn't even good enough for anyone to even listen. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, I thought this is really good, and you actually don't even give a shit.
Yeah.
So why am I even doing this?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I think about going back to it sometimes, and I may still at some point try and jump back into it and see where it could go because it's.
And why would you want to do that? Because
there's a thrill to it that is fun.
So is it like adrenaline junkie?
No, it's not really adrenaline junkie as much as it's just like it's just a creative outlet. It's just a way. Yeah. I'm not a musician, so I'm not going to sit down and play a thing on a guitar and feel like, oh man, that was awesome. But I might
Go ahead.
I might write a set that is a joke that I think is funny. And then if I can deliver that and get the response I want, then that's like a very satisfying, like sweet, I hit it. You know what I mean?
So, but like, not that I'm a musician because I would never proclaim to be a musician, but my validation.
The whole podcast on you being a musician. So
but my validation for writing music and creating music is my own satisfaction.
Yeah.
But I don't have an audience. Like, I've never performed it live, and I don't know. And
I
had multiple people like, you should play that live, and that'd be super dope. And it's like, I have to hire musicians because I do it all myself, and that would be kind of another thing, and it'd be expensive. So I don't know. Like, is it a thing where like you're actually looking for validation for the audience perspective in order for it to be good?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I think
can it not be satisfying just for you to like think something's funny and then jokes to yourself? I mean, you and I are very, very much self-promoters of jokes to yourself. Like,
yeah.
The secret to life is jokes to yourself.
Yeah, no, I don't think that it. So yes, there is a need, and to some extent, there's people that say that if you're a comic, there's some insecurity there because you are seeking validation and you do like that reward system of being validated through your act. And that may be true. I don't know, but comedy, that's where comedy and music are different. That's where it's not just because you could be on a stage performing it. Music offers an experience, and maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's not literally different, but culturally, music is something that you do enjoy by yourself, and you can hear a pleasing rhythm and have that.
Yeah.
And with comedy, it is sharing it with someone else. Like, comedy does require another person. It's not comedy if you just make yourself laugh. Like, you could make yourself laugh and be satisfied with it. And you're right. I'm a huge proponent of making jokes for myself. And I would even argue that the writing process that the best comedians use probably is that that it's funny to them, right? Like, if they think it's funny in their lens. So I agree with all that, but no, like it is something where you do have to it requires validation from the audience to know if it worked. And any comic that you listen to that talks about comedy, that's the difference. Is with a song, you can sit in a studio and write it and practice it and get better at it and arrange it and make sense of it all by yourself. And with comedy, you just don't know if it works until you go to an audience and see if they laugh. And then you figure out what words to cut out or put in or emphasize or not emphasize or leave a gap in speech or don't talk as fast here or whatever it is. But that only can be done in a live environment. So it just takes a long time to refine because you can't refine it by yourself. You just don't know if it works or not.
Yeah.
Because for you to come on, for a musician to book at a bar, obviously the bar is going to want people to show up, but for people to show up and say that was a good show, they are still sitting at their tables talking to each other the whole time. They're not. To see a good show at a bar doesn't mean that you were dancing or completely engaged in it the whole time. But if you see a good comedy show, absolutely, it's because you were engaged and laughing the whole time. It's never just a guy in the background talking.
So my only question that I would add to that, which I think is kind of a little bit valid, it's kind of weird, but is that Dave Chappelle's second stand-up that he did with Netflix was one that he was actually sitting down the whole time. Mm-hmm. And he was actually in a very small audience, and he largely just kind of, not lectured, but he just was kind of telling stories to the audience. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really like open bit, just like, here's my bit, here's my joke, here's my punchline. He said things that were funny, but those just happened to be in context of the story that he was telling. Mm-hmm. What he was really doing was just narrating whatever kind of story that he was telling. So a large portion of the story that he was telling wasn't funny at all. So there's large segments where nobody's laughing.
Correct.
So
especially when he talks about like the Iceberg Slim guy and all that.
That's what I mean. Yeah. It's like, so is that funny?
No.
Is that stand-up comedy?
No, and that's the whole point I tried to make 30 minutes ago is I don't think that stand-up comedy is a good category for that performance, because I think it's a great performance. I don't think you should change anything about it. I think everyone should watch it, but I don't think it's stand-up.
So how do you differentiate between his first stand-up and his second stand-up? The fact that he didn't get laughs every 30 seconds in the story that he was telling? Because if he told a story that was funnier and had laughs and more punchlines that were every 30 seconds, would that be stand-up comedy?
Yeah, but you can't tell the Iceberg Slim story and make it funny because it's just brutal. Like, the point he's trying to make by telling that story,
I know,
can't be told in a funny way.
Right.
So, but if
he provided little small anecdotes that were funny for whatever reason, I don't know how you would do that. But if he did do that and they were funny, would it then be stand-up comedy?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's my point that I've tried to get to, is that I think that stand-up is jokes, and what he's doing when he describes Iceberg Slim and all that is not jokes.
So is jokes based on a timing thing?
No, jokes is based on if it's intended to be funny or not, which doesn't mean that it's not about whether it's every 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whether there's an obvious premise, setup, punchline. Like, it's not that either. It's just, are you trying to get to something funny? And with the Iceberg Slim thing, he's not trying to get something funny. He's explaining why he left the Chappelle Show.
Right.
He's explaining the fucked up society and the power structure that Hollywood has and had with him.
There are funny things inside of that story.
Yeah.
Is that not stand up then? Because it's still laughing, right?
Yeah.
He's not deriving it to a joke.
Right.
So I guess you're right. It's not comedy because he's not actually pushing it towards an ends of a joke.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it can be funny in its narrative, but not as long as it's not like a means to an end.
Whereas like Ilsa Schlesinger that I said earlier that I didn't laugh at, I still think that's a stand-up bit.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is supposed to be funny. Even though I didn't laugh, it's stand-up.
Right.
David Cross, even though he can get pedantic and really draw out a point, it's all in service of trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Chappelle and Neil Brennan went off in a different direction. And again, it's almost kind of like a Joe Rogan podcast episode or something where it's just them just explaining and exploring something. And I think it's fascinating.
Right.
So I'm not critiquing it or criticizing it. I'm actually more just saying I wish we had better definitions. I wish we had more nuanced language to categorize that stuff because it's worth something. But when you say it's stand-up, I think it's easy for it to get... I honestly think it does it a disservice because it's easy to lose Dave Chappelle's stand-up where he talks about the Iceberg Slim thing as, well, that's not really like, oh, well, that's not his best. Killing Me Softly is his best stand-up act. And it's like, that's true, but the stand-up he does or the performance he does... where that ends with the Iceberg Slim story is totally worth seeing too. Right. And I don't like that it has to be compared to Killing Me Softly because they're different performances.
Yeah, no, they are. They are for sure. But they're still encompassed within the same, I wouldn't say genre, but like housing. You know,
well, that's what I say is basically if it's a guy on a stage with a mic by himself and no instrument, we call it stand-up.
But like Patton Oswalt has a good bit in his stand-up where he talks about performing in the 80s, where it was really tough because performing in the 80s, like when you went on as a comic, it had like on the marquee, like I don't remember specifically the bit, but it's like comic or like comedy. And it was just like advertising this thing that like people walk by on a date night and they were like, oh, there's something funny inside. And they would just go in and it was something that happened to you that you wouldn't expected to see. So if you weren't entertained by the comic, by it being like slapstick humor, bald knobbers and Branson kind of thing, like then it wasn't comedy. And certainly that has evolved way past that. Certainly in late 80s, 90s, even 70s with, you know, Robert Williams and George Carlin. Like they took that shit in a way new direction. And it's like, yeah, it does evolve. It does go into some kind of momentum where it's like, I don't really know what kind of genre to define it as. I don't even know how you really define comedy. Like, because sometimes it is just people like talking in social commentary and their perspective is really funny. You know, the people that just have specific jokes and points of life that are just really funny. Like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I said, I think for me, the way that I look at it is everything in service to attempting to be funny, as in service of a joke. Yeah. And if the answer to that is no, then which is why like Neil Brennan's Three Mics thing I thought was really fascinating. But him telling me about his depression or his relationship with his father isn't funny. It's not that it's not interesting, and it's not that it's not awesome that he's talking about that stuff that people don't talk about and probably helping unlock some thoughts for other people that are dealing with like all of it's powerful. And he wouldn't have that opportunity if it wasn't for his comedy. His comedy is what gave him that platform. So it's also not that I think that he's not a comic. I'm doing air quotes as I say that, but it's not that I think that he's not a comic or that he's betrayed comedy in some way. I just think that it's too, again, that's why I'm not advocating that any of it's wrong. I'm advocating that we should just have better language to define it with.
It's really actually fucking cool that you have these many people that are involved with it, and it can kind of continues to grow as a growing audience and growing like genre of people, because it does become this wide variety of people that exist within the genre that's not well defined. I mean, maybe some people define it as like soft-spoken comedy and gimmicky comedy or whatever, but really like it's all, there's no subgenres there. It's all comedy.
Right.
you either get David Cross or you get,
Carrot Top.
Yeah, Carrot Top. Right, exactly. Like, there's that spectrum. You don't know until you watch the stand-up.
Yeah.
And that, to me, honestly, is my favorite thing probably about stand-up, is that...
Yeah.
And I will know, not the same thing with music, but I will definitively know within about 5 or 10 minutes if I like you or not. And I will watch anybody that anybody recommends in comedy. And I'll be like, cool, I'll watch it. And then I'll give you like 5 or 10 minutes. And I will know within that 5 or 10 minutes if I actually like that person or not.
Yeah, someone that was really interesting for me that I watched recently. So I've listened to the Joe Rogan podcast quite a bit over the last few years. And anyone that's listened to that show, the episodes are anywhere from an hour and a half to 4 hours long. So they're very long episodes. So you really get to see Joe Rogan talk and interact a lot. And when Joe Rogan goes on stage as a comedian, he definitely has an act in this character that is not the same person that he is on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I actually find that I don't like it because I feel it, like I want. And to be clear, Joe Rogan is a successful, multi-decade spanning stand-up comedian. I am not, so it doesn't matter what the fuck I think about Joe Rogan's career.
Right.
But it's like I want to tell him, like, oh, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to put on this persona because you're already interesting enough and smart enough to make these observations and these jokes, and they will work with just you as who you are. And when you add this like rant, because basically his on the stage character is like him if he was pissed off and drinking coffee all the time.
No, right. I
And
actually
it's like-
don't like to stand up at all because I'm like, Jesus, this is obnoxious.
it's just
as
like,
fuck.
whoa, man. But
You're
that's not who
trying
he
way
is.
Too hard. Yeah, no, exactly. It seems more like who he is the person on the podcast.
Right.
He seems more relaxed, more well suited to be just off the cuff person.
But again, has done stand up for 30 years. And if you listen to him on a show, we'll say that the thing that he considers himself at his core is a stand up comedian.
Yeah,
before he's
right.
a UFC guy, before he's an
Beer
actor,
Factor.
a host, the Joe Rogan, any of that, he's a stand up comic. And he's like, if I lost everything, I could always tour as a comic. So clearly he's established as a comedian, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so I don't mean to say like fuck Joe Rogan's act or something either. It's just that it's interesting because it feels unauthentic.
Exactly. Correct.
And
It certainly feels unauthentic when compared in contrast to the show that he has on a podcast where he's
very
I was
measured
telling
and
Bridget
calm.
about it, and she was like, Joe Rogan, the guy from Beer Factor, and I was like, he's actually very insightful. He has really well-informed
thoughtful.
guests. He actually really wants to be well-informed, and he actually wants good information.
Yeah.
So he actually wants to know and produce really good information and have good insight. Like, he's just a very nice, pleasant person to, like, at least listen to on a podcast.
Yeah.
And then when I listened to his stand-up, I was like, Jesus, like, tone it down, cowboy, like, Christ.
Right. Yeah.
Like, coming out guns blazing like you're Sam Kinison. Like, take it down. Like, is that who you are? That's the show you wanted to produce? Like, okay, well, hats off to you if that's what you wanted to do. I don't care. It's just, that seems wildly contradictory of, the thing that you actually wanted to do.
Yeah,
But,
agreed.
Anyway.
All right, well, thank you very much, Misha, for joining to talk to me tonight about this.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
I love talking about stand-up and comedy in general, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon.
I hope so.
Well, that is going to wrap it up for today's show. Thank you again so much to Misha for joining the pod to talk about comedy. Like I said in the show, it's something that I could talk about endlessly. If you guys have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, by all means, email me at walker@thewalkshowpodcast.com. You can also check us out at Twitter at The Walk Show Pod, Facebook, The Walk Show Podcast, Instagram, The Walk Show. We're everywhere. So find us and get updates on new shows and all that kind of stuff. Thanks again so much for listening. Have a good one.